Welcome to the Relevance Report, where we report the relevant stories that are shaping our world today. I'm Jada Radica, your host this week. On today's show, we'll be hearing about Danielle Smith's plan to implement queer and transgender policies. We'll talk about some fundamentals of mental health and explore the resources that are available to students on campus. Then, we'll talk about rave safety and harm reduction. And finally, we'll be hearing about the Edmonton Humane Society's tireless efforts to get rescued animals adopted. Premier Danielle Smith has announced multiple new policies that are proposed to come this fall that will directly affect transgender and queer youth. These policies are expected to negatively impact the privacy, safety, and freedom of queer youth. Sydney Peach explores what this could mean.
So I'm here to say, Premier Smith, you are causing deaths. Yes!
Yes!
You are choosing to harass and terrorize a group of our community who are just trying to be who they are.
Hundreds of Edmontonians gathered on the legislative grounds to protest the UCP government's plans to implement new policies that will affect transgender and queer youth. These policies include restrictions on youth changing their names and pronouns at school, gender-affirming care, sex education, and parental disclosure. Premier Danielle Smith believes the policies will protect transgender and queer youth. However, NDP officials like MLA Janice Irwin disagree and see these policies as an attack on transgender and queer youth.
I can honestly tell you I was concerned when we heard that something was going to come, but I didn't expect it to be this bad, and particularly the attacks on trans youth. This is going to have a chilling effect on queer and trans youth across Alberta, and in fact across Canada. These will be the most draconian laws that we've seen in Canada to date, and that's pretty scary, and that's not something that Alberta should be leading on. Part of the issue is there are kids who now will not have a safe space at school, and they certainly don't have a safe space at home. So where are those kids going to go? Because I worry very much that there's going to be a crackdown in schools. Queer and trans youth are going to feel even less safe. So what for those kids? What for those students who, for some of them, maybe school was their only safe sanctuary, and that's gone as well. So I think about those kids, and that's why when we head back to the legislature, we're going to do all we can to fight for them.
A major concern for queer and trans youth is the likelihood of ending up in dangerous situations if they aren't accepted by their families. Transgender and gender nonconforming people are 7 times more likely to abuse drugs, 5 times more likely to experience mental health issues, 5 times more likely to attempt suicide, and 2 times as likely to experience homelessness.
We already see in Edmonton that queer and trans youth are overrepresented on the streets because a lot of young people, if they come out to their parents and they're rejected, they end up on the streets. And we know that the youth shelters, yes, for example, is over capacity. So I have a really significant concern here that we're going to see more and more queer and trans youth on the streets without the services and supports that they need. And so, again, we need to do everything we can to push back against these policies.
Many people at the protest are vocal about the potential harm that queer and trans youth might face if these policies move forward.
Parents think they have the right to know everything about these kids all the time, but unfortunately this infringes on the rights and the privacy of transgender kids.
If you infringe on one group of people's rights, that they're going to come after another group of people's rights next.
Yeah! Teachers and parents across Alberta are worried about the harm that these policies can cause and how queer and trans youth will be impacted in schools.
I can't see it being anything that is positive. There's so much that it could affect negatively, and I just don't see how it could be worth messing with that.
That's Shayla Cora, a parent of 2 young children and a high school teacher. She believes children should have a safe space like school to be themselves, especially if they don't have that at home.
When a student comes up to you and is like, oh, hey, I actually go by this, and I just completely ignore that, then if they come to me for any other problems, they're not going to feel safe to do that. They're going to feel like this person isn't going to do what I ask anyways. And to have it all ruined just by calling them by their legal name is disastrous. It's completely against the TQS, or the teacher quality standards. There's a line in there that we have to provide safe and caring environments. So we should be able to call the student whatever they wish.
I asked Shayla how she thinks we as a society should move forward with youth making decisions about their own identity.
I think that we need to really start looking at children as their own people. Like, they really do show their likes and dislikes from a very early age, and they like to explore things. And schools are supposed to be that area where they can explore things safely and within reason in a safe environment and be able to figure out who they are and like test things out and try out different styles. We try out different sports. We try out different subjects. Why can't we kind of explore our identity and what we do and do not like without it affecting the rest of our lives? And when we ignore their wishes, I think we're doing a lot of mental harm.
MLA Irwin hopes that Albertans who are against these policies start taking action now to prevent them from moving forward.
I'm encouraging people to write their MLA, write the Premier. There have been a number of petitions that have circulated. Folks can look at some of the organizations that have done so, like Skipping Stone and others. Sign all the petitions you can, because those go directly to MLA inboxes as well. We need to be loud, and we need to be many in response to this. And I do think, we've seen some rallies, we've seen Albertans really mobilize in response, but we need more of that. And we need to send the messages that this isn't acceptable here in Alberta. And if Premier Smith hears from enough Albertans, you better believe she'll backtrack. We've seen the UCP backtrack on other issues before, so I want to be hopeful that we can potentially, if not stop this completely, at least roll back some of the most egregious elements.
Together, we'll be diving into the current climate surrounding mental health, exploring the resources available to the public, and specifically focusing on the support available for students and the public as a whole.
In today's segment, we're opening up the almanac and checking out the mental health forecast because
there is a shitstorm coming our way in terms of mental health crises in younger people who are becoming more aware of the need for help, and there's a lack of resources to help them get that help. There's a lot of things that young people face today that other generations haven't had to face.
So that's Ashley Barlow, a registered clinical PhD psychologist. Previously shrouded in a stigma, mental health always presents new challenges.
So I'm very encouraged by the growing awareness about mental health and its impacts on people at all levels of society. There's probably a lot more work to be done there, but I do think that people are starting to put together the pieces of why some problems exist. Especially things like depression, people are a lot more aware of that, which is really nice. And dynamics in abusive relationships, and that's where I do all of my work. So people are really starting to become aware of that.
1 in 5 adults experience mental health issues each year, but less than half seek treatment due to some form of stigma. In this edition of the Almanac, resources are a focal point.
Absolutely not enough resources. Governments don't fund mental health, but you need to have benefits, which you get from your work, to be able to access private mental health support. Public mental health support continues to lose funding year after year, particularly in addictions. There's a growing trend towards abstinence-based addictions treatment, which is not possible for a lot of people. And so governments won't fund harm reduction addiction programs as much anymore. And so if you're not willing to stop using substances at all, then you're basically not able to get support unless you can afford to pay for it privately. And most people can't afford to do that. A stay in a residential addictions treatment program for a month that's private is $30,000 and is usually not covered by anything. So there's absolutely a dearth of resources for mental health despite a growing awareness of it, which is really hard to see, especially in lower income populations who probably need that support the most. People who don't have any money often don't have a lot of resources for food and shelter and childcare, and that just exacerbates all mental health problems that they have to begin with. So it's absolutely not enough, and the problem seems to be getting worse and worse.
If all these issues are currently posing adverse effects on individuals in society, what can be done? Well, for starters, on the level of MacEwan University, the faculty and the student body play a crucial role in promoting mental health awareness and creating adequate support systems for students. As the forecast warms up, I took to the halls of MacEwan to dive further into some of these systems. Jenna Williams, a counselor with MacEwan Psychological Services, was coordinating the art buffet. For those who don't know, it is a weekly event located in Allard Hall where students can gather to create fun pieces of art. And that's where it's said that
just like creating art yourself, but viewing art, whether that's like going to a gallery or even just spending 20 minutes viewing colorful images of art online, can boost mental health. So like reduce anxiety, can reduce stress, just like increase or boost your mood. And there can be like indirect benefits, for example, like going to a community event like this or going to a gallery of, social interaction and community, because I think that's such an important part.
mental health is not just about treatment, but also the prevention and education.
That you're not alone, and that I would invite people to reach out for support. There's lots of resources on campus and in the greater Edmonton community. They could come into Wellness and Psychological Services, our office in Building 7, for more information kind of about some of the resources here, but there's that's like kind of not the only, I think, option. Just like, engaging in things that you're interested in, and like I said, like kind of finding your community, or I know there's lots of clubs on campus. So I would just say to reach out in some way.
Hopefully this edition of the Almanac brightened up gray skies and educated you on how to embrace and create change. Remember, every small step towards mental wellness is a victory, and together we can work together to break the barriers that prevent access and create a culture where mental health is prioritized and supported.
Live music events are spaces where people come together and share their appreciation for artists or genres. But how is harm reduction entering the conversation at live music events? Sach Petrov speaks about a local venue owner and a first responder on how they're trying to keep raves safe.
I went to a show at local rave venue Temple Ballroom to interview the assistant manager Lucas Lagori, hoping to learn more about his own experience in the rave scene.
My name is Lucas. I'm the social media manager as well as the artist and relations. I do graphic design, pretty much anything under the sun that my GM does not do, I fill the role. And I'm the promo lead as well. I started going to shows in Edmonton in 2015. 2016, Pearl Entertainment came around. I worked with them for a little bit. Before that, there was Nightfall events. Essentially, people took a break on dubstep and stuff and bass shows, so we kind of filled the gap a little bit. That company went defunct. I ended up joining up with Pearl Entertainment as like a manager. We did that for a couple of years. I took a step back. I worked with Blueprint up until the pandemic. 2-year gap ended. Temple Ballroom I came into. There was a former manager. I came in to kind of help, and then they just hired me on to do management, and then everything else just kind of fell into place. So
I wondered what the rave scene meant to him.
For me, working in the industry, I see more of like a collective of people kind of coming together to bring music to communities that probably wouldn't get it.
He explains why casual drug use is a common theme in the scene.
You know, people just don't like drinking anymore. It's really tough to see your friends descend into alcoholism. I know for myself, I've seen the worst parts in humanity just come out from like drug users and like alcoholism. Unfortunately, my uncle actually has dementia from alcohol. So, you know, I get why people want to do drugs more than they want to drink, but at the same time, you kind of got to weigh like pros and cons. There's no easy answer on that one.
Sometimes, patrons at a rave party just a bit too hard for their bodies to handle.
Generally, we try to give them some water. If it's like to the point where we need to send them home, we do call them a cab home. So we do ensure that the patrons make it home. I personally have seen the GM as well as the head of security walk outside and make sure that said person gets in the cab. I myself, like, I've definitely sat with a few people that have been a little too fucked up. And, you know, like, I'll bring them water or something, like, if it requires it. But, yeah, if they're getting booted out of the venue, like, we definitely make sure that they make it home in one piece.
Amidst our conversation about managing drug use, he gives out some advice.
I can't say this enough. If you start doing drugs, it's a very slippery slope. I learned my lesson the hard way. I don't have a problem telling people about it. It wasn't a good time. It's very tough to watch myself go down that road. And even alcohol, I gotta say, just like everything in moderation, honestly, because you don't want to end up an alcoholic with dementia in a hospital forgetting who you are, and you don't want to end up as a drug addict on the streets.
And this is the message he spreads to new ravers everywhere.
Generally, just watch yourselves and watch your friends. You need to like be very conscious of what you're doing as well as what everyone else is doing, because like I said before, going down that road with drugs, it's a very slippery slope. Yeah, once in a while is fine. I get it. Some people have that control. Other people, they do not have that control. Same with alcohol. It's just like everything in moderation. I can't stress that enough.
Next, I paid a visit to Liam Green, a local paramedic and emergency services first responder. He's also a prominent member of the rave community.
My name is Liam Green, and I've been working in emergency services now for 6 years. I started as a paramedic and then moved into case managing for Alberta Health Services and the CDC. And then I moved to become a firefighter for 2 years, and now I'm training to become a peace officer. I got into emergency services because I just always wanted to help people. I knew there was like an avenue I could do that, whether that was going to medicine, but I thought the most direct path was through emergency medicine. So that's how I became an EMT. That was like the big reason that I got involved.
I asked about how often paramedics tend to get called to these events, and how often large events get staffed with EMS services.
Depends on the size of it, I would say. So like a large venue, something like maybe like Bomb Fest or Scream, I'd say it's almost assuredly there's staff there. Like they have their own emergency medical staff, sure they have police presence, etc. A lot of times though, like for smaller shows, I'd say maybe around 5 or 10%. Like very rarely do I go to a show and see like an ambulance called. A lot of times I know sometimes with like bigger shows, it's they're precautionary. They may not even get used, but when you have thousands and thousands of people, just statistically something has to happen, right?
He shares the most common reasons for medical teams being called to the shows.
It's gotta be overdoses, not like fights and so much, but like the side effects that would come with doing drugs. Maybe the things you couldn't plan for. Not necessarily like overdoses, like people are passed out on the ground, but the symptoms that would come with that. So overheating, dehydration, things that you could be proactive for and counteract all the things that would happen when doing drugs. It's harder to say, predict what's going to happen if you haven't done drugs before. So a lot of times I would recommend even doing drugs in like a safer place first, rather than having to go to this massive venue with thousands of people where you may be anxious, getting super warm because you're super crowded. There's a lot of things you can't predict. So if you do drugs in like a safer place or a safer atmosphere first with friends or whoever you want to use with, safe consumption sites, etc., then you can better predict what's going to happen when you are in that more intense situation. You're really enjoying yourself. You don't want to have to go to these festivals or these shows and have something bad happen you, because that just creates a bad experience for yourself or anybody else. And you want to always create those good memories. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily like avoid drugs or do drugs, just be aware of them, and if that's something that you want to do, go down. But that shouldn't always be what raves are about. Raves are about the atmosphere, the experience, the memories that come with it. Like, there's not a lot of other places on earth where you can go just dance and totally experience something. Like, music for me transcends language. It's just a totally encapsulating thing.
And in our final story today, the Edmonton Humane Society is dedicated to ensuring the safety and well-being of rescued animals. I went to the Edmonton Humane Society to learn how they're supporting the lives of animals who need a little more love. Pets play an important role in many families' lives, but unfortunately, some individuals find themselves having to surrender them to rescue organizations. Liza Sunley, the Chief Executive Officer at the Edmonton Humane Society, sat down with me to talk about the organization's efforts, a heartwarming rescue story, and the impact this organization has on both rescued animals and the Edmonton community. As we walk through the hallways of the Edmonton Humane Society, this is how Liza said individuals can best support the organization.
There's lots of different ways to get involved with the Edmonton Humane Society. You know, everything from volunteering with us to fostering animals to donating to, materials or financial donations as well.
Many pets come into the Edmonton Humane Society. These are the ones that Liza finds are the most in need of being adopted.
We see lots of dogs that come through our shelter. Large dogs tend to be with us a little bit longer. They're a little bit harder to rehome, but we've always got lots of different species coming through.
The Edmonton Humane Society takes the time to match potential adopters with their rescue animals.
We spend quite a bit of time with potential adopters, getting to know their lifestyle and what they're hoping for from, adding a pet to their family, so that we can really help to, guide them towards an animal that we think would be a good fit. We always really recommend that, families have had that conversation ahead of time to find out, is everybody on board with bringing a new pet into the home? And then the team does a great job of helping to guide families toward the animal that we think might best suit them based on what we've been able to observe.
Liza is adamant about animals receiving proper treatment when first admitted to the Humane Society.
We have a team of veterinarians on staff, so they're able to provide the medical care that animals need. We also have a behavioral team, so depending on the behavior needs, particularly with dogs, we can work with them and help them get ready for their new home. And then we have some special programs for some of our other animals. If there's a senior cat, we match them up with a senior individual who wants to bring them home. So we've got some special programs as well for those animals who, have some special needs.
When an animal is first rescued, they have a long journey until they reach adoption status.
Once they come in, all animals will receive a medical check. So our registered veterinary technologists will intake them, do a check, see if there's any obvious signs of wounds that need to be taken care of, any illnesses that they're picking up, those kinds of things. And then they go into our kennel where they're going to live with us for a while and get them all set up with all the supplies that they need while they're with us. And then we spend a little bit of time getting to know them. So we have volunteers that interact with the animals, our staff interacting with the animals, getting to know their needs. If they have some medical needs that we need to take care of, we'll be working on those. If there's some behavioral concerns, our team will work on those issues. Once we know that they're healthy and ready for adoption, then they are placed up on our website for adoption. And at that point, we do arrange meet and greets. So there's an opportunity for the family to come down and meet them. And then at that point, we're working with the family to make sure they've got all the supplies that they need. If the animal has any special particular needs, we're giving them lots of information so that they can make that transition as good as possible. Then they're adopted into the new home, and we'll do some follow-up with some of the families as well, make sure that they're settling in well. If they've got any questions, we can provide that support.
Kieran Ferentz is a university student who decided to adopt his dog. He said that people who are hesitant to adopt from rescue shelters shouldn't be because
these dogs just want a home and they want to be loved, and that's it.
And now Liza will tell us about a heartwarming adoption story.
There was a dog that we had in our shelter several years ago who really made a mark on me. He was a dog that had some behavioral concerns. We were a little bit nervous about how he was going to do, but our team worked with him and he turned around and he was easily adoptable. It took a little while to find the right family, and he did so well that he is now one of our ambassador dogs. It's one of those stories that, this is a dog that I think a lot of folks might have thought was, dangerous or not really well suited to adoption, and seeing how resilient he was and how dedicated the team was, it was quite moving actually to see his progress. The Edmonton Humane Society, we've been around for a long time, I think deliver a really important service in the community, and we're always so grateful that we have, a community that supports us.
Thanks for joining us for the Relevance Report. This week's episode was produced by Keegan Purcell, Sach Petrov, Sydney Peach, and myself, Jada Radica. The show was edited by Sydney Peach. The show's supervising producer is Sheena Rossiter. Additional studio supervision by Sasha Stanojevic. This podcast is produced as part of the BCSC 325 Radio News and Documentaries course in the winter 2024 semester. The course is part of the Bachelor of Communication Studies program in the Department of Communication at MacEwan University. The show was edited and produced out of the MacEwan Media Production Studio. Our theme music is called Buzzing by Kaylee Lambert. Logo design for this podcast is by Sasha Stanojevic. And I'm Jada Radica, your host for this week's episode. This podcast was recorded on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta, regions 2, 3, and 4 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Don't forget to subscribe to the Relevance Report on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you heard, please leave us a review and rating. It really helps people find the show. Please join us again next week when we report the relevant stories that are shaping our worlds.